On Millionaire Mindset tonight, we're going to go over how to never go broke again. So, say just and when I say how to never go broke again, I mean you could say goodbye to being broke if you just follow a few simple precepts. And a lot of it, it comes down to understanding how to access resources, funds. A lot of it comes down to uh, having the right vehicle when it comes to real estate investing. There's some things that you can do, and then a lot of it has to also do with just mindset in general. But like if you have one and don't have all the others, it will affect your ability, to maximize those things. So we're going to get into today, and we're going to make it really pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And uh and if there's anyone here who like, if you're here, go ahead and just type in the chat, and let me know that you're here, and we'll kind of get into it. So a couple things when I think about millionaire mindset and how to never go broke again. There's, over the years, like I tell this story of how when when I was first, hold on one second, just so 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 a couple of things. One, there are some spiritual disciplines for Christian life. Like a lot of those things you can look at. That's important. So discipline is so key. And as I'm looking at my board, like there are some disciplines that that are important to your ability to grow. And where are we? Right. And so you want to be able to develop into a diligent, disciplined, and decisive business person. That's what we do in our program. So you you want to develop into those things, but there are certain disciplines where it's important that my wife and I, we were just taking a walk, and we were just talking about people and mindsets. And it's so funny because people people change when it comes to money. One minute they're your friends, another minute they may not be. There's a lot of people who just change when it comes to money. But one of the things that is so important when it comes to your ability to not be broke is stop pointing the finger at people. So stop pointing the finger and making everyone else the reason, right? So um, you got to do the work. Stop making excuses, stop blaming others, trust the vision and trust the gifts, right? But however, there's your ability to access funds and be creative is the key. So so I'll just take you back to the story when I first how long it took me, first of all, to make my first $1 million in the Airbnb space, and in the Airbnb, with my Airbnb business, right? So, and one of the things that I did was I had to borrow some money. Now, I didn't have to, but I did. And I paid 24% interest on that money. And I didn't even use the money. I just put it in the bank. Now, I just wanted a cushion. Okay. So, and how did I get that money? It was private money. It was private money. A friend of mine who was the head of a real estate investment uh, group in upstate New York, Western New York. He introduced me to another guy who lent money, and he lent money, private money, to investors. And so we were able to close on that funding. It was private funding. We were able to close in, what was it, like a week and a half. And what he did was he took actually a lien against one of my places. So that was fine, no big deal. But I paid 24% interest on $100,000, and I had to pay it back within 2 years. So, and you might think that that's a very complicated thing to do, but if you're in any city in the country, and you inside of these cities, there are real estate investment groups, right? They're national RIAs, real estate investment associations, right? You could look them up right on your computer. You go to a real estate investment association and just attend one of the meetings, attend a couple of the meetings. There are people in there, they're there because they want to lend private money to people who are investing in real estate. And and that so it's really about contacts. It's about being in the right place at the right time, and it's about also knowing what you're going to do with the money, right? There's also, lenders who or people, like, in fact, one of the things we do with our students who grow really, really, really fast in the Airbnb space, leasing places, we help them get funding. We have private sources where we help them get funding. And they get funding by way of either private sources or by way of just credit cards with like 15, 20, 30, $50,000 balances and things like that. So we'll help them do that. One of the things you can do when it comes to getting yourself some funding is, one thing you want to consider is going ahead and getting yourself an entity. Now, when I say an entity, I'm not like, it could be an LLC, an S corp, or C corp. However, if you're looking to do it so that you can go out and borrow funds, like get business credit, you do it in an S corp or C corp. It literally takes you 48 hours to get a C corp or an S corp or an LLC online. You could do it, and I think it's like $300 to $400. If you do that, then you could go to different banking institutions and borrow money, right? So that's another way. Now, here's a way where you could actually, from a creative perspective, and this is how I kind of started back in the day, and that was with real estate, but having people do private funding for you when you pick up the places. So for instance, you may have a real estate investor who is looking to get rid of places, and or is actually selling places, and then you can negotiate where they would hold some a mortgage for you, or they might do rent to own or lease option. Like, you could do any of those things. If you talk to enough people, there will be someone that will say yes, they'll do it. Now, that's how I started. My first property ever, way back, gosh, golly gee, I don't even remember how long that goes back. It was in 1980. I think it was in 1990, 89, 90, I think is when I got my first place. I think it was 90. And and that's what happened. There was a gentleman. His name was Ender Malik. I remember his name today, still today. He held the mortgage for me for a place. He actually did, was it? Yeah, seller finance. And once I got the place, what I was able to do was I started doing a little bit of fixing up. It was a cape, a single family cape house. Me and my fiance at the time, we moved in, and and then she helped me take the upstairs, and I fixed up the upstairs. And the upstairs was just an attic that was just unfinished. So we fixed up the attic, and within like 6 months or so, now we had a upstairs, and we made it into an efficiency apartment. So I made it into an efficiency apartment, and I was able to rent out the bottom apartment while or the upstairs apartment, the efficiency apartment, while we stayed downstairs. And then I was able to refinance that place, and the money that I put in, or the value that I created, because I didn't put that much money in, maybe a few $1,000s to do it, because we did everything by hand. And then the value that we created by doing that, with the seller with doing our own work, putting their own sweat equity into it, it went up. It raised the value of that property by about $20,000. So I was able to refi the place, pay off Ender, put $20,000 in my pocket, and I bought another place down the street. And then I rented both of those out, upstairs and downstairs. I had income, and then I had a single family down the street. And then here we go. Right next door was a place where the lady had the place had been vacant for like 2 years, and no one knew where the people were. Well, I found out where they were. It was a lady who was in a nursing home because she had gotten sick, and her family put her in a nursing home, and they just left the place sitting. So I negotiated a deal with her, held a mortgage, and I did the same thing with that. I had to go and clear it out because it was a mess inside of there. And when I say a mess, it was a mess. It was like they just came and said, "Ma," one day they said, "Ma, we're taking you out." Like they didn't, there was no notice, because everything was left exactly the way it was. And that wasn't good. Why? Because that means food was everywhere. That means rodents were in there. It was my indoctrination into fixer uppers, right? It wasn't a major fixer upper, but it was so nasty inside, right? And those are the kinds of things where, like I used to say back in the day when I started, I love when a house smells like this. I don't love it anymore, but that was the smell. Like when you smelled rats and dirt and poop, like when you smelled all that stuff when you walked through the house, to me it was like it was the smell of money. Why? Because most people couldn't see through all of that, but I could, right? And I had to, because I started with no money. So I had to come in with being creative, using my elbow grease in my mind, right? And seeing through where most people couldn't see it. And that place actually ended up, she held a mortgage. I think, what did I do? I think I paid her like $1,500 deposit. She held a mortgage for me. I turned the place around, got tenants in there, and did the same thing, refied that, refied it, took out about 50 grand from it. And then, that the tenants were paying the rents. So that's what I did with that place. So rent to own, seller finance, lease options, like you could do all of that with and have access to properties. And when I say lease options, like you may be renting right now. And if you're renting and you have a great relationship with your landlord, maybe your landlord, like every place that we lease. So for instance, I have like a bunch of leases all over the country. And my leases, what I do with the leases is I use them for Airbnb, right? And so the owners know that we're using them for Airbnb. It's all in the leases that we're able to use it for hosting our guests. But one of the things I do in many of my leases is I will write in a first right of refusal clause, where I have the ability, if they sell, I have the first right of refusal. So that way I get to look at the deal. And then sometimes what I'll also do, so if they go to sell, I get the first option to buy it at the price that they're looking to sell at, right? And so if I'm making a ton of money on that place, what I could do is I could lock it up with that option, and then either hold on to it, or I could sell it myself. Right? I've done that. In fact, I did a lease option agreement with a lady when I did one of my Airbnbs, and the Airbnb was in upstate New York, and it was the first one I had ever leased. right? And when I came in, it was a professor who had just gotten this job down in Atlanta. So it was like I was a godsend because she didn't know what to do. And I came in, I told her you don't have to move anything out. Like we'll use the furniture, all of that stuff. We'll take care of the place. If there's anything you need us to send you, we'll send it to you. She's like, you would do all that because she had to be out by like within a week. She had to be down in Atlanta. So we moved really, really quickly. And and to her, we were the best thing since sliced bread, right? And so after about 3 or 4 months of us having the place was generating great money on Airbnb. It was out in the suburb of Rochester. And then I, I had a little bit of an instinct that she wasn't trying to come back. So I messaged her and I said, "Hey, Michelle, are you like, how's everything going?" "Everything's going amazing, Jim." And I'm like, "Are you planning to come back?" She goes, "Nope, I don't think so." I said, "Well, how would you like to give me an option to purchase?" And she goes, "I'm interested. Tell me what that looks like." And so I explained to her what it is I would put in an option to purchase a place, and I have up to, I think I put 9 months, it may have been a year or so to purchase. It might have been a year. I don't think it was 9 months. It might have been a year, it might have been a year and a half. And the price that we were purchased for, I locked it in. And so she's like, and what I'll do is yeah, so she was like, okay, cool, because we already had a great relationship in that sense. We were taking care of the place. She was getting her money on time. Like we came in and swooped in and saved the day for her when she didn't know what to do with the place. So we did that paperwork, and then about 6 months later, I realized that the market was changing really good, and I wasn't going to keep that Airbnb. And the reason why I was going to keep that Airbnb is because, again, I was relatively new in the space at that time, and that place was in an HOA. Now, all HOAs are not an issue, but in this case, this HOA, people were just nosy, and they really didn't like Airbnb being next door to them. Like I've been in many HOAs since then, never had an issue. But that one was an issue because there was also another clause in the HOA that said if you weren't the owner, no, if you were the owner, you could only lease the places to, it was like family members or for a year. It was something really, really strange I'd never heard before. So I was like, okay. So I was getting calls, right? And I was trying to find out like how could you, like, I know real estate in this area. I've bought and owned a lot of places, and I've never heard anything like that. But I've never had anything in the HOA either. So anyway, I decided that, okay, if that's going to be the case, I'm going to exercise my option. You might think, well, why would you exercise your option? You can't use Airbnb because the prices had gone up. So I had about my option. I had literally, I think it was about $40,000 in equity. So if I would have sold it, I could have, the price that I was going to buy it from her for, I was able to purchase it for about $40,000 less than what it was worth. Right. So what I did was I told her I'm going to exercise my option. The deposit that I had originally put down to rent it, she actually used that as a deposit for my my option. And then what I did was, like, I've probably sold over 300 houses in my life. And out of the 300 houses that I've sold, I've probably only use a realtor. I could probably count on my hand how many times I've used a realtor. I've always sold the places myself. I wasn't a realtor, just as an investor, whether it be on Craigslist or just different marketing techniques that we've used. I've always sold them myself. Well, in this case, I tried to do the same thing and it wasn't really working. I don't understand why. So what I did is I put it on the market. put it on the market, let a realtor do it, and we sold the place. All I had to do with that place was put a new uh, garage door on, which was like $600-700, and I had one of my maintenance guys do a new furnace, efficiency furnace, that was a $5,000 furnace. I was able to get it installed, purchase it and install for $2,500. So I had just over 3,000 into the place, and I sold it for $40,000 more before. So when I sold it, I had it. All I did was exercise the option. I just created a purchase agreement with her, and then I sold it for $40,000 more than that, and then we simultaneously closed. I simultaneously closed, and the people that bought it, they paid me, who paid her, and then I kept $30,000 in my pocket. So that's kind of how that worked. So there's a lot of different ways. Now, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because, like, if you're just willing to be creative, if you're willing to do the work, stop making excuses, if you're willing to just sit and just trust the vision, trust the gifts that you have, then there's money all around you. You just have to realize that it's there and stop focusing on, like I like to say, the lack. Like, recognize all the abundance that's out there and stop focusing on the lack. So, and when it comes to getting, and I see you, Tina. Yeah, do the work, get the reward. It's true, right? I mean, that's something that when we talked about, again, developing discipline, diligent uh, uh, business people, right? Disciplined, diligent business people. Then, if you decide you are going to be one of those, you have to be willing to do the work, right? And so in any case, that's an from a millionaire mindset perspective. Oh, now let me just get back to what I did with the $100,000. So I borrowed the $100,000, right? And why did I borrow it? I borrowed it because I wanted to have some cushion, right? And I wanted to have the cushion because I was getting into this new space with Airbnb, and people were starting to ask me if I could coach them and things, right? And so I was like, okay, I got to learn how to do this stuff. However, I had a plan because I had asked my wife about 2 or 3 months before, honey, how would you like to go to Spain to live for a year? She goes, really? Because that was always like on her bucket list, to go to Spain. And I said, well, how would you like to go and live for a year? And she said, yeah, that would be great. So what I did was I said, okay, let's plan for a year. A year from now, we're going to leave United States. We're going to go to Spain, and we're just going to live there for a year. She says, okay. So now, like, I made this commitment, right? And I had all this traditional real estate at the time. Like, I had a bunch of rentals, traditional rentals with a bunch of traditional tenants. And what I said was, I'm not going to be playing around with traditional real estate. Like, I got to find a way to not have to focus so much energy on the traditional real estate. So what I did was I told all my tenants that I'm not going to be doing like, they're not going to be able to talk to me anymore. Like, don't talk to me about rent. Don't talk to me about, like, I'm going to just, my team is going to be there. You're going to have to deal with them. And I'm thinking the tenants were so used to seeing me because I was there a lot. I was always around in my places. And some of them I knew weren't going to like it. But I also told my team that they can't talk to me anymore either. Now, what does that look like? Well, the reason why I did that was, like, I told them, you could text me, you could get on Zoom. And the reason I said Zoom is because I knew that my life was now going to be an online life. Like, I was teaching all my students, it was online. The stuff that I was doing was online. My Airbnb, the stuff that I was doing with Airbnb was online. The people that like, the landlords, like, a lot of this stuff was all online. So I'm not going to come offline just to talk to people doing traditional real estate, right? That was used to me going to lunch with them, calling them on the phone, talking to me on the phone. No, I said, either text me or get on Zoom. So I figured that I probably would have some backlash. And if I did, it could cost me financially. And I did not want to have to be concerned about it. So I put that $100,000 cushion in my bank account so that in the event I did get the backlash, I wasn't going to be concerned about it. It is what it is. right? Because I wanted to be focused. Well, here's the end of the story. The end of the story was it took me about 18 months of focus, but within 18 months, I was making with my Airbnb business over $100,000 a month. And then that first year, after I hit my first $100,000 month, that first year I generated over $1.3 million. And then next year more, the next year more. So it paid off, right? You might think I rolled the dice, but rolling the dice was gambling. No, business is not about rolling the dice. Business is about calculated risk, right? Calculated risk, understanding how to mitigate your risk and having calculated risk. What was my risk? My risk was I knew that if I focused on doing this thing and I got the right resources to learn and understand it, I could do it. That was my risk. And I'm willing to risk it all for that because it meant that much to me. I made that commitment to my wife, but it wasn't just about the commitment to my wife. I made the commitment to be free and be able to travel the world and not have my cash flow affected regardless of where I was geographically, right? And so that was the risk I was willing to take. Are you willing to take the risk? Like think about all the greatest people who in business throughout history. Think about the kinds of risks that they took by what betting on themselves. That part isn't a risk. That part isn't a gamble. When you're betting on yourself, when you're investing in yourself, if you're willing again to do the work, stop making excuses, stop blaming others, trust your vision, trust your gifts, and the most important thing, trust the Lord. If you're willing to do that, and not necessarily in that order, because trusting the Lord has to be first and last, right? So you got to make sure all that other stuff is in the middle. And if all that other stuff is in the middle, then there's no way you should ever be broke again. You could say bye to being broke for the rest of your life. So hopefully that was helpful. I wanted to share that. If anyone has any questions, hey Linda, if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to post some questions in the chat box, in the comments. If I'll hang out for a few minutes. However, I do have a live session with my Airbnb mastery students at what time is it? At 7 o'clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this if no one has any questions. And then I'm gonna prepare for my Zoom session with my Airbnb mastery students. And but hopefully this was helpful. And if it was, then all you got to do is implement. Just implement. So like and subscribe to the channel. Save the video, rewatch it, share it with someone who might be a blessing to. But most important, implement. Just implement, right? And that's the greatest way that you can help me is or thank me. Just implement the stuff. All right. So God bless you. And all the Millionaire Masterminds, if you're in, then you could jump on the Zoom. You should have the link. Same link as last week. You should have the link, and then we'll get into it in just a little while. So God bless you guys, and I'll see you when I see you. Peace.